Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's episode, I'm very happy to welcome Aleck Brownstein. Aleck is a regional vice president at Volvo Car USA and has an impressive background in the automotive industry. He is very passionate about making the careers of technicians better and has some unique insight on the industry that he is here to share with us today. Aleck, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thanks for having me on today.
We've had a lot of really fun, good conversations over the last few months. I very much appreciate your insight and really kind of your opinions on the industry and ways that we can improve it. And so when we scheduled this, I was really excited to get you on. And I'm curious, how did this get started? What was it about automotive that stuck out to you and got you into this business?
Well, thanks, Jay. You know, I often say to my friends, I was kind of doomed and destined to be in the car business. So both my parents love cars, my mom and my dad. Actually, when they got married in the late 70s, they had a pair of 67 Corvette Stingrays that they
Ooh.
drove. And if anyone knows anything about the values of Corvettes, about the 10-year mark is when they hit rock bottom and then they start appreciating again. So they had them at the kind of the bottom of the market and they both kick each other all the time for selling those cars. One had AC and one had a competition clutch. But that's just kind of how it all started. I always loved cars. I still have the first car I ever got, which is a 56 Chevy pickup.
Ooh.
And it's evolved over the years to have everything is custom on it. It's on air ride and it's got a LS. And then that's why I drove to high school. And in high school, we were really lucky. I went to Ramona High School in San Diego, and we were one of the first 10 General Motors Automotive Yes accredited auto shops in the country. So Mr. Michael Jordan, not the basketball player, but the famous auto shop teacher, he really fought for us, and he was inspirational, and he spent so much time working with us kids to really help push us in a great direction. We a number of us competed nationally in auto shop, and it was really fun. And I can say that when I was at the New York Auto Show troubleshooting competition in high school, they told us that we would have all the tools we needed to troubleshoot. And my partner and I, we didn't see the 5.5 millimeter socket in the toolbox, and we missed the coil pack being bad, so we didn't get our car to start.
Oh
Isn't it?
man.
So it's just funny how circumstances evolve, but I think we can all agree that troubleshooting is such a valuable skill. So after auto shop and in high school, I was because I love cars so much, I was signed up to go to Cal State Long Beach for industrial design when I found out about Northwood University in the Midwest. So Northwood did a real soft recruitment at the New York Auto Show competition, and my parents and I, we flew out in May after the April competition, and in June and July I was enrolled to go to Northwood. And Northwood is a great school. It's a small business school really focused on entrepreneurship, and then it's backed by the National Auto Dealers Association for their automotive program, and they have an automotive aftermarket and an automotive marketing program. It was a great foundation for me. And it was also really fun to go to school with other students that loved cars and the car business. We would end up just sitting around in the afternoons or in the evenings having a beverage, and we'd talk about working and running car dealerships later in our lives and what we would do and how we would do things different. And it's a lot like what you hear dealers talk about in a 20 group meeting, but that was our college experience. So bouncing ideas off each other, a lot of case studies. The curriculum is really fun because the first 2 years you go through as a frontline employee through every department in the dealership. Then the last 2 years you go through as a general manager. So kind of thinking about things from a strategic standpoint. And then it all culminates with a simulation at the end where you and a team of students utilized an OEM simulation to see who would be the best dealer in the group. And that was
Wow.
really fun. And it all comes down to fixed operations, right? It's the backbone of the business. So
It's crazy because we're the timing of this. We're about to have Thomas Litzinger and James Odell on the podcast from Northwood coming up, and I wasn't as aware of Northwood in like my youth or growing up, and it was a shame because when you see the way that is structured and hearing you talk about it the way you just did, and you see a lot of prestigious alumni that came out of that school, it's a gem. It is an absolutely great school here in the Midwest, and one that if you have a young one that you're trying to get into the business, that is a school you should have circled to go visit.
it was really fun at my early career. So after Northwood, I went to work for Honda, and Honda had a couple of alumni that started recruiting from Northwood. And then there was a small rat pack of us. There were about a dozen of us that had all graduated within a 3-year period that all went to work for Honda at the same time. So for 10 years, we evolved through our careers at Honda together. And it was really fun because then at national meetings or month end closes, you could get together, and then there's a history there. And there's also a ton of people you can count on. And I would say that that's so important, is to know who you can count on the team that you work in with, so that you get things done. And sometimes it's those relationships that really help spur the growth. So let me just keep going a little bit about my background, and then we'll jump into some of the other questions that we were going to talk about. But
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I went to work for Honda in the regional office in Chicago. And that was great because I got to learn kind of the analytics, and I was responsible for newsletters and communications and planning events. And then I went out to the field as a district sales manager. And then I had the opportunity to interview for my dream job at the age of 25, which was being a product planner. And being a product planner is being the sales guy on the design team. So I
Mm.
got to go work on the Element and the Ridgeline, two US developed Honda automobiles, great award winning trucks, really fun. The Element has a kind of customer following like no other car. And then the Ridgeline was really kind of first of its kind. And now you've seen some other OEMs kind of copy that unibody truck design. So really fun, but also one of the jobs that I learned the most in, and there was the most scrutiny over what was done on a day-to-day
I
basis.
bet.
Yeah, we weren't hitting sales objectives, so we had to go in front of the Japanese executives every month and explain why we didn't hit the sales goals, and then what we were going to change to the product to make it hit the sales goals. So
How does that meeting go? I mean, are you going over there? Are you going to Japan, or are they here, or how does that work?
um, the executives come over, once a month or once every other month, and you're either in Ohio or LA, and it's very formal meeting. The engineers sit on one side, the executives sit on the other, and the design team sits on the other side of the room. And it's a little bit of a pressure cooker. And
I
but
bet.
it's probably part of what makes Honda so good, is
Yeah.
that the scrutiny on everything. So I would say that the Honda executives all come from an engineering background, and that engineering background is very similar to a technician background, where
Right.
you learn process, you learn some perseverance, you learn troubleshooting, and it gives you a lot of credibility in the future of what you're doing. So that was one thing I really learned about Honda, and that engineering background is important. And even though I don't have an engineering degree, I understand a lot of what goes into it. And being a tech early on and having the fundamentals of the car are so important in every meeting. So then I after I was in product planning, I went to Washington D.C. as a district sales manager, because someone gave me some advice early in my career, and they said, if you can tie yourself to revenue, you're always going to be in a safe position. And it's really good advice that I took to heart. And I've always tried to tie myself to some kind of revenue. And by doing that, it safeguards you against upturns and downturns in the economy. And you also can, you prove on a day-to-day basis how valuable you are to your employer. And that was really good advice that I heard.
That is great advice. And I think there's a number of different things there before we move on to some other things with your background. Uh, the first being the power of a network. And I think that's one thing that we could improve from on the technician side that you were able to experience as a district sales manager, because that when I worked for an OE, some of the best relationships I ever built were through that network, right? And my coworkers that did the same thing. You had, similar to what you were talking about with your experience at Northwood. It was just common. I don't know. It felt like you were on this team, this very, I don't, it was almost like a brotherhood, right? Like
There's
you
a
all watched
camaraderie.
out for each other. There's just something
Yeah.
different there that's really hard to explain.
It's kind of, I think people that go through the military experience a lot of valuable life lessons, and it's kind of that platoon concept. It's very
Yeah.
similar if you were in a team that does problem solving or troubleshooting, or I like being the underdog. Like being the underdog is fun because then it gives you something to excel to and win and feel really strong about. Sometimes when business is easy, I don't know what to do. It's like I need the next challenge.
I think we've all been there at some level, right? I
Yeah,
totally agree, and it can become easy to become complacent or bored in those scenarios. So always challenging yourself is interesting, but uh, I think it's something that as we take on this conversation, that's one thing that we can talk a little bit more about too. Is that those shops that do have that camaraderie and that brotherhood in their shops with those technicians, the ones that really like to support each other. And from now an outsider's perspective, where I'm not in a shop every single day, it became very, very clear when you walk into a shop which ones have that and which ones don't, right? And I think you can almost, it's, we talk about the culture thing a lot, but that is one area where you're like, you walk in, you're like, oh, these people like each other, or hey, you walk in, something's not right here.
yeah, you definitely can feel it. I when I go and I visit dealerships, I always start by walking in through the workshop, and I park my car in the back. I never park in customer parking. I park in the back and I walk through the shop. And sometimes, every once in a while, I get stopped, but usually no one says anything, and I just walk right in and start talking to techs and see what's going on, and what are they fixing today, or what can we help with. And it's really, that's where we get the best information. And it's also, you're right, you can tell the culture by walking through the workshop. It's very
100%.
apparent right away.
So let's talk to how that's led to where you're at today.
Yeah.
You've got a really, really good job and do a really good job at it. What got you to this point? Obviously, all of that did, but
Right.
what led you into Volvo?
So that was a great foundation. And I went to work for Honda. My last role at Honda was working in the allocation system and some reporting. And that was really fun. And I really learned there that sometimes some of the less glamorous sounding jobs are actually the most fun and the ones where you can have the most creativity.
Hmm.
So I saw an opportunity at Volvo and I rolled the dice, and it was the best thing I ever did. So I came to work for Volvo in 2012. And in 2012, we were selling about 50,000 cars a year. Um, Last year in 2023, we sold over 130,000. So
Wow.
we've more than doubled our business over the last 10 years. We've launched three new um, platforms of cars, electrification, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and it's been really a great ride. The best thing about Volvo is really the culture here. It's a company where I was really surprised when I went to my first management training classes, and they talked more about feelings and like supporting each other, and really getting to the root of why someone may have underperformance. And it was kind of eye opening. I had to pinch myself a little bit because That's not what they teach you in management school.
Right?
But it really, you talk about the camaraderie and understanding each other and how to push each other to higher levels and push for performance. And that's really what we've learned. And it's really great. And I have, our team out here in the West is about 27 people, and we all have different backgrounds. And someone asked me the other day if it was form or function and what was more important. And I really said the function, because there's several people in our region that have the same roles, and they all have a different way to get to the end. And at the end, they all accomplish the same thing. And I think we've seen that in workshops too. There's some technicians that lay out the cardboard box, and they take one bolt off and they label it, and they draw a circle around it and they number it and they lay it all out. And then there's the other person that throws it all in their tool cart. And at the end of the day, both cars run, and they run fantastic at the end, but they have a different way to get it done, right? And
Yeah.
it's not saying any which way is right. It's what works for that individual. And that's it's really great to see that.
Well, I think that is interesting because I think that helps keep the individuality in the job as well. I think anytime that you feel like a robot, or that you're just there almost like that factory worker, right, where you're doing the one thing over and over and over again, that can be taxing, that can be wearing. I think that's one of the benefits of what we do is some of that individuality and the different levels of talent and the different ways that people go about it. What I'm curious about is you went from a Japanese car company to a Swedish car company, right?
Yeah.
And when we're growing up in the industry, you always hear the differences, and maybe that German car company or that European car company of some type that is out there versus maybe one of the big three, or versus that Japanese or even Korean companies now, right? And like the difference in culture, the difference in how they're run. Was that something that was pretty glaring to you, kind of the differences in just their approach of how they go about business?
Yeah, it's funny. At the end of the day, the same thing is accomplished, right? The OEM sends cars to the dealers, retailers sell it to customers, and then there's a support system for after that happens. And it's done a little differently at each one. You're exactly right. There's a little bit more feeling, and we put a little bit more emphasis on the customer at Volvo. I mean, at the end of the day, Volvo is all about safety. And we've said
Yes.
that the reason why we exist is to keep our customers safe. And we're never going to stray from that. And then Honda is an engine company, and they package their engine around different products, whether it be an airplane, a lawnmower, a boat motor. They make engines, and that's their strength. So every OEM has a different strength, and they have a different focus. And I'm proud to say that ours is really people centric, and you can see that over time it's stayed our core value. And
Yeah.
things like the 3-point seatbelt. We invented the 3-point seatbelt, and we gave it to the industry. We could have charged the royalties for it, but we didn't.
That's incredible. And I, from growing up at a young age working on cars, always remember Volvo being that was their thing, right? It was safety. And then remember some of the older station wagons that like we had a couple. One was an attorney in our small town that I think had 400,000 miles on this Volvo in Wisconsin, which is not an easy spot to put 400,000
No.
miles on anything. And it still ran like a top. It's still an excellent car. And every time they came in, we're like, oh, how many miles are on that thing now? And it was incredible how good a shape it was still in after that long of a time.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the techs from today, like in our office, we have a wide variety of roles that work out of the Western Region office. So not under my team, but under another team are what we call them the fly-in medics. And a few of the guys on that team are actually Swedish and moved to the US and have lived here for years and worked on some of those, 240s and 740s and 122s and all those red block cars, and have it's really amazing to see them evolve over time to troubleshooting electrification and battery issues and hybrid issues of today. And it's really fun to see that evolution happen and how Volvo has really stayed, reliability and safety is at the core, but the technology and the way in which we do it has evolved over time.
If you're enjoying Beyond the Wrench, remember to follow and rate our podcast to help support the show. Right now, we would like to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Wind River Payments. Are you okay paying a bunch of added fees for credit card processing? How about waiting for hours or days for a call back from tech support at your payment processor? Wind River Payments is not okay with that either. In fact, a desire to get rid of the empty promises of the payments industry is one of the reasons this merchant services company was formed back in 1999. Now, over 2 decades later, family-owned Wind River continues to thrive by bringing integrity, transparent pricing, and a higher standard of service to its customers. They've been serving the automotive industry for over 20 years and would love the opportunity to serve you too. Give them a call at 833-274-5875 or visit windriverpayments.com. I always ask this whenever we have somebody with experience with technicians from other countries. What is their process in bringing technicians up in Sweden? Is it more of an apprenticeship type model, or I don't know how much you know or how familiar you are with that over there, but I'm always interested to learn how other countries handle it.
I think one thing I've learned over time is that actually our training program here in the U.S. for retailer technicians is stronger than the one in Sweden.
Wow.
So, but what I would say is that there are better apprentice and mentorship programs over there. Their pay structures are a little bit different than ours. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just a little different. And a lot of times they look to our team to help build the curriculums for the new car launches and really training the future. And it's great that we have that knowledge base here.
It is. That's incredible. I would have never thought that. And I think it's a testament to what you guys are doing with the North American branch here, doing a phenomenal job with that side. And I think that's a really nice segue into really our topic of conversation today, which is all about technicians. And knowing that you didn't come from maybe that traditional technician role, what was it that led you to become so passionate about these technicians? Because you can feel it every time I talk to you. There's something more there. Where did that come from?
It's funny. Nothing happens in this business until a car is sold, but it's also the service department that sells a second and third car to the customer, right? So I think it really stems from my roots. When I was in high school, I would go to school till noon, and then in the afternoon, I would go work at an independent.
I did the same.
It was an amazing experience, and I really thank Gary Blakely at Future Automotive to this day for that experience, because I'm sure I didn't earn what he paid me in all I did, and I learned so much, and it was great because I got to see what happened on a day-to-day basis, and the role is not easy. It's not easy. Every situation is different. Every customer's car is different, and it's one of those things where the passion I have for it is that we gotta grow this side of the business. We've looked at it, and we need 900 technicians over the next 3 years. That's a lot of technicians. And the only way to really grow that is to start looking at different avenues. And when you talk about career pathing, and when we talk about, how my career path is different than a technician one, I've always gotten a lot of credibility by saying I started out as a technician.
Yep.
And if you can say I started out as a technician, or if you say I started out selling cars, and no knocks on the sales side, because I am a sales guy too, but instantaneously, where do you have more credibility?
Right.
So it's it's a very valuable role, and it's one that it's just I just love it.
So you mentioned the shortage, the needing 900 techs over the next 3 years. I think this is consistent with what the rest of the industry sees, and we've seen it for quite some time now. What do you think led us to this point in time to where there is such a shortage, and why we're all grasping for straws at some point?
I think what you guys do on a day-to-day basis, like getting the tech schools or schools that have technical programs involved with people that have jobs, is so crucial, because there's uh, been a whole generation where we were told that, you know, go to college and 4-year degree is the only way to success. And I think that that's really unfortunate, because there's a lot of people where they end up 4 or 6 years out of school with a ton of debt, and maybe they'd be better off going into a trade, understanding the nuts and bolts of how things work, and then, if needed, go to a 4-year school after that once they've saved some money, or have um, a career, and also have someone that's willing to help them with some of that schooling. You know, there's a lot of companies that have actually dropped the requirements for 4-year degrees.
Seeing it more and more now, right?
Right. And there's life skills that are so important that go, hand in hand with what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. And we talked about the teams and the culture, and those are things that you can only learn by being on a team. And if you're in school just doing things, sometimes you don't learn that.
Yeah, and I think that's where education really ties into me in terms of if you're actually able to take that education and put it into action, right? If it's just going to make your parents happy or to check the box to say that you went to school, I think you're going to be really disappointed with the ROI on that education. But if you're going because it's something like you, where Aleck, you're passionate about cars from the start, it's something that you've always had a passion for and probably you will until the day you die, right? If you're not passionate about it, that's where I think people get themselves into a little bit of trouble. Even technicians at some level, right? I know in going to tech school myself that there are technicians there or potential technicians that probably shouldn't have been there. And it's heartbreaking to see that because you know what they're paying, you know the tools that they're probably going to buy up front, and you know that they're most likely not going to be in the industry within, a few years after they start. And that, I think, is part of the core problem, right? Some of the root of the problem is maybe making sure, doing a little bit more due diligence that the people that we are pulling into the industry are the right ones, that it's not just another warm body, that we actually have somebody that has career aspirations in this business and it's not just a pipe dream. They actually have the skills to be able to do it. I think the more we can work on that, the more of that really skilled workforce we can get in.
I think the other problem too is that the career pathing has never really been
Mm,
outlined very well, and that
it's been
people think
terrible.
that it's I don't people think that once you're a tech, you're going to be a tech forever, and that it's 25 years in, and then at 55 or 60 years old, hopefully you've saved enough to retire, but you're going to have a broken body at that point. And I don't think that that's a fair way to go into it, and that we should really talk about, this is just a start. You know, when you look at, there's someone on my team who his role is on the sales side of the business today, but he's one of my favorite success stories within Volvo, because he started out as a technician. He became a service advisor and service manager, then had the opportunity to become what we call the fly-in medics, the field technical specialist. Then he went into a role around customer experience, and then went in as a after sales market manager, and then led the after sales market managers, and then now is a market manager, which is a highly esteemed position within the organization. And it's really fun to see people take different career paths to get places. And it also opens up that individual to have a different conversation with the dealer principal or the general manager or even the sales manager or used car manager at the dealership to say, when the used car manager starts complaining about, the recon being so expensive, the reconditioning being so expensive on his used cars that are coming out of the shop, then, you just walk back and you get the service manager and you get the parts manager and you get all the managers in a room and you just hash it out. But without that experience of being a service manager before or being a technician, sometimes you're afraid to have those conversations.
I could not agree more with what you're saying there, because, and the one point I want to stay on here for just a second is the need for more success stories out there. I think in a lot of ways, there are a lot of really cool stories that are similar to the individual that you just talked about that nobody knows about. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the OEs do themselves a disservice. I think the dealerships do themselves a service. I think a disservice. I think the industry as a whole does ourselves a disservice when we're not talking about those, because the perception is exactly what you said. You're going to get parked in the back. You're going to stay there for 35 years. And then when you're done, you're going to be worn out, and then we're going to be done with you. And that's not always accurate. There are a lot of opportunities for people that have that base level, and not even base level, like extraordinary level of diagnostics, or they have the mechanical ability to be able to share that. But we just don't do a very good job at telling those stories as an industry.
There's 8 gentlemen that sit in our office, and they're all former technicians, and they sit and they're either visiting dealerships or they're on the computer helping and telephone helping technicians troubleshoot. And it's great because they get to see a large number of cases, and they get to see more cars and troubleshooting situations than a technician on a day-to-day basis. So they have a broader knowledge base now, but that knowledge base all started from the Bay. They all started as technicians, and then they were the best of the best. And then, they decided that they wanted to come to work for the OEM, which is really amazing and great.
I think that's an element that's missing out of a career plan, though, right? Is when that dealer is out there, and if they have a good technician, most times they're going to do everything they can not to lose that technician. But they fail to maybe sit down and have a conversation with that technician around what are your career aspirations. And I know I've had that conversation with technicians numerous times where they say, I would love to go work for the OE, but there's almost like this barrier to where my dealership isn't going to let me climb the ladder. And I think the dealerships for the short term probably help themselves out because they might hold on to that technician longer. But if their true aspiration is to go work for an OE and you're the perceived roadblock, you're probably not in the future picture of as their employer moving forward anyway, right? So why not create that path and say, hey, listen, if that's the ladder you want to climb, we're here to help you. We want to help support you. And I think it goes, this is something that might be, as somebody that went from an OE to a dealer, I did the opposite, right? I went to the OE first and then to a dealership. It can help your dealership with that OE dealer relationship, right? If you've got that person that went to go work for the OE, there's a number of benefits to being able to show that career path. But I don't think I've ever seen a dealer show that as an opportunity.
Yeah, I
I
agree
get
with
it.
you. And I think that in a perfect world, and something I've dreamt about before, is almost a sabbatical for technicians to come on to the OE side for like a year or two, and then to go back into the dealership, maybe not clocking flat rate, maybe more as a mentorship role. And we haven't figured out how to make that work exactly, but it's something we've talked about, and we bounce around ideas.
That's a great idea. I mean, think about that. If your dealership has its own fly-in medic, right? If
Exactly.
that's factory trained and they come back to you. You talk about the respect level. That would be a different level of respect.
You're 100% correct. And the other one too is, you know, this isn't something that we're doing, but we've talked about, and we throw around lots of ideas and we haven't figured out the exact right way to do it. But is there a way to reimburse the dealership for some of that training? And is it in future training credits for other technicians to get them? Can you then, if say a master tech or a mid-level technician leaves and comes to work for the OEM, does the OEM then say, well, we're going to grant you 2 apprentice techs out of our trade school to help backfill? There's lots of ways that this can be done, and it's a partnership. We just need to sit around the table and figure out how to make it work the best way we can.
That OE dealer relationship is always one of the most unique ones that I think is out there. And I know this from my own experience. There's some OEs and some dealers that like they just don't see eye to eye. They're it's almost like they're fighting each other constantly. Whereas like the ones in my experience, the really, really good dealers were the ones that embraced that OE relationship and had that transparent conversation with them consistently and didn't try to hide stuff, right? And I think there's always that level of tension if there's from either side, if it feels like the OE's holding something back or if it feels like the dealer's holding something back and you're not fully vested in each other, that you're not getting the full value of that relationship out of it, as if you just kind of went at it head on and said, hey, let's work together on this thing. Let's make this an amazing place for technicians, not only technicians, for everybody. Like we can work together and do some great things.
And it's really hard because sometimes it all comes down to the dollar.
Yeah.
And there are some things like warranty policy, and there's statutes around warranty policy and how all of that works. And I think sometimes that's where some of the root cause of that tension comes from.
100%.
Right? Because someone feels shortchanged, and it can be on both sides of the table. And then we have a customer at the end of the day that we all really need to take care of. They brought in their car and their car needs to get fixed. And then there's a customer that's a technician that needs to get paid, and a parts department that needs to move the part through. Like there's a lot of people along the way, and unfortunately there's some tension along the way, and some of it's healthy and some of it's unhealthy.
It's a good point. There is healthy tension, and that's not always a bad thing. But it is one of those things that, when we talk to technicians, this is one area where I think OEs could help out a lot. And I think at some level, at varying degrees between OEs, but the explanation of flat rate hours, right? Or how much time you're giving a technician to do this specific job and everything that goes into it. Because I think a lot of technicians just assume, well, they did the job in their nice, fancy shop and there's no rust, there's no anything going on with it. It just was, everything was easy to take apart, and it's not realistic to what the real world is. But from my experience on the OE side, we were looking at work orders. We were looking at different types of data to be able to see what we should be doing a job in, or what time is sufficient to pay a dealer on a job. Because from the OE side, you go broke if you're paying 10 hours if the job takes 5, right? So trying to maybe create some more understanding there from the OE side to the technicians might be really beneficial, so they understand how those hours are being generated or being produced.
And I think you started that by saying the tension or the accountability is needed. And one of the great things that we have at Volvo is a really good dealer advisory board. And it's a group of 12 dealers from around the country. So we have high volume and low volume dealers. We have rural and metro dealers on there. And I was in a meeting about 9 months ago, and they said, these 2 labor op codes for these 2 generations of cars, we're seeing a lot of them. And our technicians are saying they just can't do it. So we went back and we we reanalyzed the labor, and we found out that it was a long job. It was a 14-hour job, and we ended up bumping it 3 hours,
Mm,
which is a pretty significant percentage of 14 hours
yeah.
based on that feedback from the dealer. So it is important to have that communication and the transparency and the trust. And also, you're right, there is a lot of analysis that happens on punch times. And I know everyone hates it when the warranty clerk comes over and says, you didn't punch the RO. I can't get you paid on this warranty claim because you didn't punch in or punch out. But we use those times to really make sure that things are fair,
Yeah. Yeah, and
right?
it has to be fair. It's not an open checkbook, and
No,
I think that was one of the things I learned on the OE side was that it isn't an open checkbook. Like you're trying to, in a lot of cases, go back to a manufacturer of something to get reimbursed yourself as an OE, and there's just such an intricate process that goes into that. And I give the OE that I work for is on the construction equipment side, but it was Bobcat Company, and they did a phenomenal job. We sat in the warranty department for like 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and we processed claims, and they showed us the whole process. And it was incredible for me to learn that, but I don't think we do a good enough job being able to share that with the technicians as to how it comes. So the only time that we're going to hear about it, if you're that rep that's out there, is when you walk in and they say, well, they just cut this job by 2 hours. Like I was already struggling to make time, and there's no real basis of how they came about it.
yeah. And yeah, you're exactly right. That is a point of tension. And I think one thing to understand is like when we do labor guides, it's the repair is done in our workshop. And you're right, it is nice and clean, and we do it on new cars, but cars under warranty are also pretty new too.
Pretty new. Yeah.
So we do it 3 times. And uh, when I was a technician, there were a couple rules. There was one that said that if you borrow a tool 3 times, you need to buy it. And
Yep.
the other was don't count on beating the clock until you do it for the third time. And
I
that,
think
right? I
that's
mean,
great advice. Great
yeah,
advice. I love that advice.
you learn the first couple times, and the third time, yeah, you should beat it at that point. And the first two is kind of your education to get to that point. And hopefully the service manager or the dispatcher that you work with has something else to help give you to offset maybe that little bit of time that you didn't make. Is there some PDIs or brake job or some gravy work to offset, right? Because it's a
Make
balance.
it
You
right.
can't
It
get
is.
all the trouble, all the no starts and troubleshooting. You got to have a balance in your bay.
Technicians, have you checked out WrenchWay yet? WrenchWay is a free online community for automotive and diesel professionals. Whether you're looking for a job or not, WrenchWay makes it easy to explore new opportunities, stay up to date on what's going on in the automotive and diesel communities in your area, and helps improve and promote the technician profession. Check out all of the job details you care about before you apply or interview with WrenchWay Top Shops. Details like photos of the shop and answers to the questions you actually care about instead of the same old copy and paste job description you see everywhere else. Open to new job opportunities but don't want to apply yet? Create an anonymous reverse job post and let shops reach out to you and see what's going on with the industry in your area through WrenchWay's Shop Talk. Join the WrenchWay online community for free by visiting wrenchway.com or by downloading the WrenchWay mobile app. Link is in the show notes. How does that play into, and this is always one of those elephant in the room conversations. So whatever you're comfortable with talking about, we could talk about. But I feel like at some level, some of our current warranty system, this isn't Volvo specific, this is just industry specific. It feels like we almost promote part swapping because we don't pay for diagnostics, right? Or in a lot of cases, it's limited pay for diagnostics. And I've seen it personally where you walk into a dealership and, hey, I'm not going to spend the time to diagnose this because they're not going to pay it for me. So I'm just going to throw this part on, see if it works, and then go to the next one. And it feels like that's another area where we could get a little bit more on the same page, but because we don't pay for diagnostic, or maybe that's not fair to say. It's not so much that, but it's more like I, I think to the root of it, how do we get on the same page there so it isn't just part swapping all the time?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like you when you go to the doctor. Um, so I'm gonna step out of Volvo for a second, and then I'll
Yeah.
step back into Volvo. So I think I think all of us know a friend or family member that's gotten sick over the years, and they have a bunch of specialists. And what the specialists do is they treat the symptom, and then once that symptom is treated, it creates a side effect, and another doctor comes in. And then at the end of the day, you've got six doctors all in a silo, and they treated now six symptoms, but they didn't make the patient any healthier, right? So now let me step back into it and say, we actually at Volvo, we have what's called gen op time, and we support diagnosing the car the right way. In the state of California, our lemon laws are very stringent, and we want to make sure the car is diagnosed right, because it's if it's down 30 days, that's what the law states. That's a you know so um we can't just throw parts at it. We have to fix things the right way and ask the right questions, and that's why we have something called the power of three. So if a car comes in for a third repair, if it's down for 3 days, or if parts can't be had for 3 days, we need to be alerted as the OEM, because then that's a code red that we need to help that technician get the car fixed. Whether it's a part that's back ordered, whether it's troubleshooting, getting the symptom to repeat itself, if we need on-site support, if we need desk side support, we really try and stand behind the technician to help them, so that they're not alone and they're not just throwing parts at it, because then we hold them accountable and the service manager accountable too on that car at the end of the day. Like, yes, we're a partner together, but we're also the dealer's biggest customer in the service
Right.
department.
It's so true. I love that rule, by the way. That is a really, really good idea. And, I think we're getting there as an industry in terms of being able to charge diag time. I think that's been a killer of our industry for a long time, is adequately charging for that. And that's not warranty related, but just as we were talking, I'm like, oh, we should touch on that, because it is one of those things that comes up in conversation like all the time. And so making sure that we're getting more education out there for the listeners to be able to understand that. Now, I do want to shift back to the career pathing thing.
Sure.
And the reason we brought this up to start with is because we were talking about hours given on a job. That's important because of flat rate and how a technician is paid. Do you see a time where technicians should be coming off of flat rate, or maybe they peak at flat rate and they plateau and they need to maybe come off of that?
Yeah. So I do think that there's a couple opportunities, right? Is it a foreman role? Is it uh, a mentor role? Is it the ability to float around the shop and act as a second set of hands to help all the other technicians as well? Like,
There's a
if
lot of
you've seen a
value in
lot
that.
over the years, and could you make the whole shop be more effective by helping teach in the real life situation? Because I think one thing I'm learning as I visit more and more dealers is that they really rely on the OEM to do the training of the technicians, but there's so much more to teach. And let's be honest, not everyone can read a book and learn out of it. I'm a hands-on learner. I like
Same.
to, right? So the only way I'm going to retain it is if I actually do it. And maybe that's the right time to teach it, but you need someone in the moment available right then to say, oh, wait, let's stop. Let's talk about why this happened. How are we going to fix it? What parts there are? How do we troubleshoot it? I don't know about you, but like following a trouble tree to diagnose something is so tedious to me. Like it drives me crazy. But that's a skill that's needed as a technician. And sometimes if you can just learn it on the cuff, it sinks in a lot better. And then it makes your job more fun too, because you're like, oh, the car is doing this. I got this. Instead of beating your head against the wall and getting frustrated, right? So there is a time and place when a technician can evolve to that level. And I think maybe that's a little pie in the sky that not a lot of dealer principals think that, but there's also a certain amount of volume in a workshop fixes all of those things. And when
Right.
you can justify the efficiency and when you don't look at every head as an exact revenue source, that's when you can get to this utopia where it's a team. And what does the team do? And how can you create a pay plan with some benefits to all employees, or you can say, hey, if you can get the workshop to this level of efficiency, now you've justified your pay, and let's work off this bonus level.
That was one of my mentors early on would always, if I had an idea, say, okay, make a business case for it and write it up. And I've told technicians that in the past too of, hey, you've wanted to go into a role, or and maybe it's not their place, but maybe they work with their service manager or fixed ops director to come up with a plan. And I think where a lot of technicians get frustrated is a lot of times they're not even in that conversation to be able to justify it, right? And I think that's where we can really make gains, is that if we're on the same page with that technician up front and we're talking to them and we're having good active conversations about where they want to go with their career. And to be honest with you, there's technicians that aren't the clearest communicators in the world, so you kind of got to you need to pull it out of them a little bit and ask good questions and make sure that they even know where they want to go, or that there are opportunities and other different types of things out there. But I think you want to be crystal clear with them about what opportunity is out there and if they would actually even like that opportunity, right? I know we've all probably been in a scenario where you aspire to do this one thing, you do the one thing, and you're like, don't love it as much as I thought I would.
Agree 100%, but it's also the willingness to take a chance, and taking a
Hmm.
chance on your career and taking a chance on yourself. Like there's times when you can always say, I can always go back to what I was doing before, but it's worth taking the gamble and the shot to go do this. I mean, I've moved cross country 7 times
Wow.
for work. And, it is important to realize too that some jobs and some careers only happen in certain locations.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be rooted in a place, then you're going to be kind of, that can steer your career path one way. And if you're willing to move around and go different places, it can open up other doors. And that's important to realize too, is that you can't always grow by where your roots are.
It's hard to come to that realization. I've had to fight that myself, and I've got friends, a lot of friends that are in corporate America. One of my best friends, he's on a plane every Monday and comes back every Friday. And I don't know that I could live that lifestyle, but knowing in corporate America that was needed to be able to move up the ladder, right? It wasn't that you were going to stay put to where you were. And it's just part of it. It always has been. And I think that's a great point. You have to know what the sacrifice is to really truly understand if it's what you want.
Yeah, it's definitely worth understanding. And sometimes it's really a talk you have to have with your partners. It's your significant other, your family, your kids. Like it's a little bit easier when it before you have kids, because as you have kids they get more rooted. But it's really important to have those conversations. And then also your point about talking to technicians and having one-on-ones and just understanding how people are doing in their role. Just the open-ended question, how are you doing,
Yeah.
is
That goes a
really,
long
really
way, doesn't it?
powerful. and
It really
and
is.
when they say I'm okay, that's not okay, right? That means there's something 3 levels deep, and you need to get it out of them.
And that's a skill. That's an acquired skill from a leadership standpoint. That's not something that comes overly natural for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
being able to even see what those, whether it's a visual cue or something in their response to you, and being able to pull that out of them, that is something that is a truly specialized skill. And I think some of the best leaders out there, they have it. They know how to pull that out of you.
We had a really fun, technician, training class for service managers at our last parts and service conference, and I think I shared this on the forum that we did that, but where we had every service manager in the room just send a text message to one technician or employee at their dealership, just asking how they were doing about a specific situation that they knew they were going through in their personal life. It was just a text message. How long does that take?
Right.
And you should have heard the dialogue that was created and the amount of value created in that relationship just based off that one thing. So you're
That's
right.
cool. That is
Yeah.
such a cool thing to do, and I think it is a great visual of something that is so simple that we avoid oftentimes, that can lead to so much. It can lead to a better relationship. It can lead to more understanding of where they are at in their personal life. And I think that was just such a cool thing that you guys did. What a brilliant idea.
Yeah. I wish it came from one of our training vendors that we lean on a lot, and they come up with all kinds of crafty ideas. And they really, I think the best thing is they understand our culture and they understand people. And that's really the value. And
Yeah,
being a
I
good
I would
manager is
say.
just understanding your team. It's something we all can get better at every day.
So we've got about 5 minutes left in the podcast. One thing I want to ask you about is how we turn some of this stuff around, maybe the vision of the industry, how we fix some of the things that are perceived as not being great right now. Any thoughts there as to what we can do as an industry to kind of move this thing forward?
I think we talked about the transparency and we talked about the relationships between the OEM and retailers. I think that that's so crucial. I think coming up with some really good ways to exchange talent over time, like we need to create a good work environment on both sides of the table. And um, there's work to be done there. I really think there is. I think those ideas we have, some at some point in time we're going to be able to put them into use, but we need to find some people that want to help us do that. And when we look at some of the most successful dealer groups in the country, I would say you can also look to some of their racing heritage. If you look at the Penske organization or the Hendrick organization, they understand process, they understand teamwork, they understand how important a great facility is, taking care of the customer, the process behind it. All of those things go hand in hand. They take care of their teams. I would say they have some of the highest employee morale out there, and they're doing the same jobs as other people at retailers, right? But they've got the support system to get it done. And yes, they may have a bigger checkbook behind them, but they also generate a good amount of revenue as well.
And they didn't always have a bigger checkbook than everybody else, right? Like they've worked their way. I know I've talked about this in other podcasts we've done, but I'm a really big racing fan, and uh, Roger Penske is one of my idols in the industry, and it's because of that stuff. His attention to detail, his track record, and same with Mr. Hendrick, right? Like they're just so impressive. But you're right. When you walk into one of those places, it's just a different feel. It is more of that race team feel, and I think that's a spot on thing. I think we can learn a lot from that side.
Yeah, I agree. It's really fun to go visit those retailers, and there's a lot of really good retailers out there too that understand teamwork and um, I always laugh when we hear about the pizza party on your podcast.
I don't know. Like, I think that we got that from social media and it's like it exploded. But yes, always a topic of conversation.
Yeah, but like that's not the way to celebrate success. That's the way to feed everyone, to keep everyone going on a Friday and to say thanks, but let's do something a little bit better, you know? Like I don't think you'd see anyone doing a pizza party at one of those two, dealer groups that we talked about, but it's funny.
Isn't that
And
funny? Isn't that
and it's
funny?
really the culture. How do you have where does the dealer principal walk into the dealership? Do they park their car on the side of the dealership and walk into their side door office, or do they walk in through the workshop and say hi to everyone and see what's going on and walk the lot? And there's when you walk the back lot of a dealership, you can tell what's going on.
Yes, you can. And such good advice as this whole podcast. I'm listening and I'm just fascinated by your thoughts on things because I do think it's different. And even what you're talking about with maybe different ways to use those experienced technicians that are out there, I think in a lot of ways dealers, independents, whoever it is, they don't do it because they've never seen it done before and they've never seen maybe that concept proven out. And I think the more we can push the boundaries as an industry and try some of this stuff and know that, hey, maybe there is a small financial sacrifice in the short term to try this thing. But if this thing works, it could change a lot about the industry. And so I like the fact that you're bringing innovative ideas and different things that we could do. Now we just need some people to try them, right? We need them to try and do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, we have a system called everything in the car business is an acronym. It's called
It
VSS,
is.
Volvo Simplified Service, but it's a two-person team in a bay. And we have a dealership down in San Diego where they implemented the entire workshop as two-person teams, and it's really great to see. And it's one of those situations where 1+1 = 4. The amount of productivity that comes out of the two-person team is amazing, and their culture is great. Now, you're exactly right. The short term, there were some stumbling blocks for the first year, and it took the fortitude of the dealer principal and the general manager and the service manager to really say, we're going to give this a go. It's not going to be pretty. Sometimes we're going to have to problem solve as we go. We don't know what we don't know, right?
All right.
But it's great to see how that shop works, how the general manager really the general manager today is the service manager that implemented that. So
Wow.
it's really cool to see the career growth. He started as a technician. We talk about the
Another
different career
story.
growth. Yeah, another story. Yeah. And John is he's a ray of sunshine in the dealership. He walks in every day and his goal is to make the day better for everyone around him. So it's awesome to see it. And they do things like team huddles every morning, and it's real-time scheduling with customers. Did the customers get it right away that they were now scheduled like a dentist's office? No, they didn't. But when you tell the customer you have a 10:30 appointment and they show up at 11:30, the service advisor has to have the fortitude to say, I'm sorry, Mr.
You
Customer,
missed your
you missed
appointment.
your appointment. I can either you can wait and we can try and squeeze you in, or we can get you can come back tomorrow or the next day at this time. And give the customer the choice. If people are given choices, they usually don't mind.
Right.
But it's really
Man,
cool to
that's
see
good.
that.
I think there's a whole other podcast for us is talking about the two-man operation and general shop operations over and above some of the stuff that we talked about today. Aleck, I can't tell you thank you enough for joining me on the podcast. I really do appreciate everything you do for the industry and for all of these ideas that you're bringing, because we need more of them, right? We need more and more great ideas, and just appreciate everything that you're doing and what Volvo is doing as well.
Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate. I talk about the WrenchWay every time I go on a dealer visit. It's really fun to talk about the journey that you and your team are on, and how we can promote the industry and bring more people into it. It's a great industry. So thank you for your time today. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to have a voice.
Thank you so much, Aleck.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.